So in the MTC, like I was there for 11 weeks, so I was there forever, and I felt like I was like, man, I've learned everything I could learn in the MTC. I've got everything down. I feel like I can't progress in the language anymore because I just was studying so hard, so much. And I remember flying to Korea and talking to my first Korean. I was like, and I just like couldn't say anything. I didn't know anything, and it was just a shock to feel like, oh, I'm doing good, and then just like get there and like, whoa, it's totally different. But one of my favorite memories of first getting into Korea was that everyone is Korean. Like in America, it's kind of like a melting pot. You got Hispanics, you got white people, you got black people, you got Indian people, you got all these different kinds of ethnicities. But in Korea, everyone looks the same. Like, granted, they all look different. Like, I'm not saying every Korean looks the same, but they all have the same like color of skin and eyes and like hair and height. It's like, oh my gosh, everyone's the same. Like, that was like shocking to me. I was like, whoa. And then I don't know, one of my favorite things was when we landed in Korea, got to the Bonbu, the office, right? And the APs, they took us out to dinner. And I went and I ordered Jeuk Bogumbap, or Jeuk Dokbap. I think it's Jeuk Bogumbap. Okay, I'm losing my memory. But it's pretty much like this rice dish with this like spicy pork, and you mix it together, and it's super spicy, but I love it. And it's still like my favorite Korean dish. I can't wait to go back and just like eat that like every day. Anyway, that was awesome. And then probably one of the most shocking things is, I know a lot of mission presidents don't do this anymore, but the first morning, we had a bunch of missionaries in there, and we all needed a shower, and so there was a mogyokdang right next to the missionary, or the mission headquarters, right? And mogyokdang is a bathhouse. It's where guys go and they take baths in the morning, and they'll have like spas and hot tubs and all this different stuff, and there's just a bunch of Korean guys in there, and it was just, you go in the locker room, get changed, and walk in, and there's saunas, and you're just taking baths, and it was a really cool experience. Even though you probably might not have that experience if you're going to Korea. Just depends on if your mission president is like Korean or not. But mogyokdangs are awesome. I love it. So I got on my mission. I got into Korea around 2007. And so the Korea Seoul West mission had been around, I don't know when it was started, but it had been around for a long time. And basically the boundaries of the Korea Seoul West mission is south of the Han River. And then it kind of goes down to it's most of like Seoul. It's all the city. You got Incheon, Gimpo, and Seoul, and that's like it. So it's really one of the smaller geographical size missions. But every mission area had like millions and millions of people. Like my smallest, the most rural area when I served in Gimpo, which is like the country, had like 400,000 people just in like just the city area, So it was just like huge, lots of people. But I don't know. So the Korea Seoul West mission about 2010 was dissolved, and they just had the Seoul mission, Daejeon, and Busan. But and then because they basically combined Seoul West with Seoul. And then a couple years later, they reopened it. I'm not sure on the total boundaries for it right now, but they had pretty much Seoul, I think, is about the same. I think it cuts off the Han River. And then everything south of the Han River, I think it's pretty much the same boundaries, but they call it Seoul South now. So it's the Seoul South mission, which makes more sense because it is south of the Han River, Seoul West is like, it wasn't really west. So the church has kind of always grown steadily. Korea is like the Bible Belt of Asia. It is very, very Christian. And so the craziest thing is like like at night, you can get up on your rooftop if you are living in a big apartment building. You can look down, and just like in your view, you can see, probably count like 30 to 60 crosses. I mean, it's just the neon crosses everywhere. I mean, my first apartment there was a bar at the bottom, and then there was a church, and then our apartment. So that was, anyway, there's churches everywhere. And so the church, I mean, Christianity is very well established. I mean, Buddhism is very small, and then Confucianism is kind of, their culture is Confucius more than that's actually being a religion. And then there's like a minority of Buddhism that's there. But yeah, so it's like everyone is Christian. And so that's one cool thing. At least everyone knows about Jesus Christ, and they know kind of about God. They may or may not have prayed, or, they probably go to church like once a year. Or if they go to church, it's more like going to a rock concert than to church. So it kind of, we bring a different case into it. So some of the challenges, the church in Korea has kind of steadily grown, because, Koreans are great people. They have great faith. I think they're of the tribe of Ephraim, most of them. And so, that's steadily grown. One problem that a lot of Koreans have is, in Korea, they're such a social people. Like, they have this hierarchy thing. It's embedded in their language. It's like the way you talk to people it's like if you're talking to a kid, you use a different form of language. If you're talking to your grandpa, you use very honorific form of language. And so their whole society is built like that. And so a lot of times after work, they'll have these, it's like you work all day, and then you have to go out to dinner with your boss and all your colleagues, And if you don't drink, it's huge pressure to drink. It's like you're almost insulting your boss, which is bad. And so for the church members there's with how social Korea is, and there's so much like kind of peer pressure that it makes it a little bit harder for Koreans to not necessarily to accept the gospel, but to stay in the gospel, because they just, it's like they're getting pounded. So a lot of families in Korea, a lot of good families I know, that they actually get baptized. They're in the church for like a year or two, and then they move to America or Canada or something, which is really sad, because then the church doesn't grow as much in Korea. But I know the apostles and the general authorities have told a lot of Korean families to stay in Korea, because then it helps it to grow. So there's tons of less actives in each ward. I'm sure it's similar around the world, but I know we'd have just a list of less actives. And so when I go serve in an area, instead of just like going to visit a member and then going door knocking and doing all those other things, I would try to like maximize my efforts. So I'd find all the less actives in that area around the member, visit the member, visit all the less actives, and then do any proselyting or anything else in that area. And so I try to like maximize our efficiency. And so if I could do anything over again, I would have bought a GPS and taken it with me. I don't know if like cell phones that they have now have GPSs on them, or if like your iPad has a GPS on it, but I just remember wasting hours trying to find these addresses. And then I'd have, when I get into a ward, I'd have them print out the ward list, and I would just start I would go visit everyone and just like cross off, like they don't live there anymore. They don't live there anymore. Like, oh, they do live there, but they don't want to talk to us. Or, I'd kind of just try to find everyone I could, because there was a lot of less actives, because like from that social pressure that all Koreans kind of face from living the gospel, there's a lot of less actives. And so, if you had a GPS, that would be super nice. So my first area was Incheon was the city, which is like huge, and I served in Gaesandong. It's kind of in the middle of Incheon. Incheon's like where the airport is. It's kind of like a big island. Not really an island, but it's like a big chunk off of Seoul. It's right next to Seoul. And so I served in actually Incheon most of my mission, or right around there. So Incheon, Gaesandong was my first area. And then my second area was Kimpo, which is right above Incheon. And it's just kind of like, that's that country area where it's like there's a big city, but then it's just like fields, all the rice fields, and just very country. And so that was a super fun area. The church in that area was pretty small, like the ward, like everyone that was like an active member was the bishop at one time. So it was like, who's going to be the bishop next? But it was a great place to serve. I served there for, I think it was like 5 transfers. So I was there for like the majority of my mission, at least the longest area. And then from there, I moved to Shilim, which is like probably one of the most smaller, densely populated areas. It's like downtown, heart of Seoul, like huge. And that was a great place to be. And then from there, I went back to Bonghua. I became the zone leader of the Incheon missionaries. Because anyway, so Bonghua was like, it's funny because Bonghua is like next to Gaesan, it's next to Kimpo, and it's in Incheon. So anyway, then I served there. It was great. And then after that, I went to Yeongdeunpo, and Yeongdeunpo is where I finished out my mission. And the cool thing about Yeongdeunpo is they built one of the biggest church buildings they have in Asia right now. I don't know if it still is, but on my mission in 2009, I think they built it in 2008. It was like the largest LDS building in Asia, and this thing is like huge. And so that was really cool, and that was like my ward building. And so a lot of times we just try to pull people off the street and like take them on tours because they have all these like posters set up, and so we could kind of teach them the lessons as we walk through the building. It was like a huge gym, huge chapel, tons of classrooms, like multi-story building. But that was a really cool thing. That's where they would have, like, when the general authorities would come, that's where they have the big conferences in Seoul. So Kimpo was awesome. Like I said, I served most of my mission there, like 5 transfers or 6 or something. I can't remember now. But the cool thing about Kimpo is, well, first of all, let me kind of explain. Like, when I was flying into Korea when I first got there, I like looked out the plane door and it looked like this Lego land. It looked like Legoland because all the apartment buildings, because everyone lives in these like skyscraper apartment buildings. They do have a lot of Jutech, which is like an older kind of fourplex kind of thing. It's got these twisty stairways and it's kind of crazy. But everyone in Korea lives in these like skyscraper apartment buildings that are all built out of concrete. And when they build them, they're in like these like just, like if you were looking from a bird's eye view from a plane, it's just like this massive circle. It looks like all these little Legos like just stacked. And then there's like green trees underneath it. So it's like, anyway, it looks crazy. Like nothing I've ever seen before. But the cool thing about Kimpo is like, it was really a nice area. It was kind of the country of Korea, like out in the boonies a little bit. Not like Daejeon. Daejeon's like really the boonies. But Kimpo, it was a big area. So like we had a huge area of just Kimpo where it would take us even a couple hours to drive, like an hour to drive a bus to the other side. And then there was this island that was probably like an hour and a half away from the church that was next to Kimpo. And we'd go out proselyting there. As like they'd probably never seen missionaries because there's not missionaries out there. There's not a ward building out there. And so it was kind of fun to go out there. We didn't go out there very much just because it's better to proselyte around the church because people are close to the church will actually come to church, I think there's a statistic, if people are like 20 minutes away from the church, then they don't go as frequently or something. And so we try to work in that 20-minute circle around the church building. But Kimpo had a lot of interesting, like for our P days, we had a blast. We would go and one time we rode our bikes all the way out to this far island, and it took us like an hour and a half to get out there. It like took us like forever, and we were just like cranking on our mountain bikes. And then it was like we explored all these like Buddhist temples and stuff, and there's a lot of really cool ruins since it's like right on the edge of the the ocean, you know, because Korea is like a big peninsula, and this was like an island kind of out in the peninsula. There's all these like old forts where they just have like these big dirt mounds and like where they had cannons and all that kind of stuff. So there's like a ton of really cool places to explore on P days, and that was like our favorite thing. Like P days, we just like put on our gym clothes and then we just start running, because we just like, we get permission, you know, not to wear our missionary attire. We'd wear name tags and still and stuff, but there would be so much stuff to see that we'd just go explore the countryside and go hike the mountains with all the Korea people. And anyway, it's just a lot of fun being in that area, because there's just a lot to see. I can't really remember. There was an island, so there was like, we kind of did some island hopping. And anyway, you're not supposed to ride boats as missionaries. I learned that after. Even though I read it every day, I didn't think a ferry was a boat. So anyway, we rode a ferry out to this like Buddhist temple. It was like really cool. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like a fun experience. But some of my favorite memories from Kimpo is actually, I helped find the apartment. I don't know if it's still the apartment that missionaries use there, but it was like the top floor of this, you know, skyscraper apartment building, like 23 stories, 25 stories or something. And right next to it was this like huge soccer filled stadium thing. And so every morning for P day, or every morning for exercise, we'd actually wake up at like 6 o'clock and we'd go play miniature soccer with all these Koreans. And that was like my favorite thing. Like, so about an hour every morning, usually supposed to wake up like 6:30 and then exercise till 7 or something, but we wake up at 6, play soccer for an hour with all these Korean people. They're out there every morning, they're out there in the middle of the winter. Like, the weather in Korea is very similar to Utah, I would say, except for way more humid. And so, it does get hot, it does get really cold, it does snow, but it's just humid since it's right next to the ocean. And so, they'd be playing soccer all the time, like every morning. And so it's just a blast getting out there and just playing soccer with these Korean guys who've been doing this their whole lives. And like, I'm not very good at soccer, but I love to play it. And so that was awesome. It helped me get through some harder times on my mission, just to get out there and just play hard. Yeah, Korean food is amazing. I love it. So to kind of give a background of like Korean food, Korea has been in between China and Japan. And so Korea, like, for a lot of their history, has just got their butts kicked all the time. Because like China is this superpower, Japan is like this superpower, and Korea is in between. And so like China will come and like take over Korea. Genghis Khan came and take over Korea, and then Japan like is like occupied Korea a lot of times. So they've been really like kind of beat down, and like they've had a lot of times where they've had a lot of hard times. And so their food is built around that. So like a lot of their food is like self-preserved, like kimchi. You've probably heard of kimchi. Like, yeah, it's Napa cabbage. They put all the spices and soak it in salt water, and then they put it in a pot in the ground for like 3 months, and then you eat it. And it's awesome. I love it. So all their food is kind of fermented, so it can be in the pots in the ground at a very like 50, 40 degree temperature and last for long times. And so they're like Korean food, and like they're like the experts at keeping food that's preserved, because they've had so much hardships. They're like experts at preserving food. And so all the food that you eat is kind of like, it's been like kind of pickled or preserved in that kind of way. So that's kind of like a background of the history of like how their food works. But some of my favorite things is Korea are like the best in the world at barbecue. Like, I'm sorry, like American barbecue is not even close. Like, they just know how to like slice and dice meat and then marinate it and then cook it. So it's like, doesn't matter. Like, I never had like a chewy piece of meat in Korea. Like, the way they package it, it's just like, instead of like in America, you buy a steak, right? In Korea, you'd buy like a steak, but it's more like a rib or just a slab of meat that's been like, they like slice it all up, so it's like kind of cubed, but it's still all connected. And then because that like makes it more tender. And then they soak it, and it's just like, and they marinate it. Anyway, and then when you cook it, it's just like perfect every time. And so the Korean meats are just killer. They're awesome. They're so good. Like you probably heard of bulgogi. Bulgogi is like kind of what they're known for, but it's super good. They're the best at marinating meat. So tons of awesome meats. My favorite thing to do, and probably the meal I ate the most in my mission, was I'd actually go to the little butcher shop, and I would say, give me the cheapest pork. And the cheapest pork was actually the leanest pork, the pork with the least amount of fat in it, which in America it's like, yeah, lean meat's usually, more expensive. So it's kind of opposite a little bit. Anyway, so I get this pork and we chop it all up and, put it in the lettuce. They'll put like rice and then their meat and some samjang in their lettuce and just eat it in these little lettuce wraps. And I love it. Not every meal does that, but a lot of the meals, like if you're eating samgyeopsal, samgyeopsal is basically bacon, but it's bacon that's like, it's thicker and it has more fat on it probably, and sometimes even has like a little bit of skin and hair, like sometimes you see a little hair poking out, but it's cooked, it's good, don't worry, and it's washed. But samgyeopsal is awesome. It's basically like bacon, and you like slice it up, these big thick pieces, dip it in samgyeopsal, grab like a pickled garlic, put it in some rice and on a lettuce leaf, and just eat that thing. It's just like, Korean food is super healthy. Like when I got home, I started eating like these casseroles and all this kind of stuff, and it was just like it was super hard to adjust from like eating like meats and vegetables. Like they're very kind of almost like pagan diet. Is that paleo? It's not pagan. The paleo diet. Pagan, that's totally whatever. Anyway, that's kind of like a paleo. It's like lots of vegetables, lots of meats, a lot of good fats, and a lot of like the fermented foods have like probiotics in them naturally, and so like your digestion is just like working like a champ in Korea. And then you get home and it's like casserole time, and it's like, whoa. Anyway, so I have a lot of people that go to mission, when they get home, they struggle with that. It wasn't too bad for me, but the food is amazing. And it's addictive too, with all the fermenting. Like kimchi is literally addictive. Like when you first smell it, it's like, oh, like it smells like a really bad, like a pile of poo or something. But it's like, once you start like eating it and then smelling it, and like just after a couple fast Sundays of smelling kimchi, man, you just like crave it. So it's super good. So I've actually now been home from mission for like a couple of years, six or so, 7 years. Anyway, my wife, she loves kimchi. She loves everything about Korean food. In fact, a lot of times she'll request, I'm like, can we just go get Korean food? I just feel so good after I'm done eating it. Because there's just like so much vegetables, like sprouts, and just all that, what's it called? All the fermented food like kimchi and pickle, like all those different things that they pickled garlic. And anyway, it's really good for your body, and it's really healthy food. So Korean is probably the second hardest language for English speakers to learn. It's super easy to read. Like you could learn to read Korean in like a day. In fact, before my mission, I had a bunch of Koreans in my ward, and they actually taught me how to read it and pronounce it. But to actually be a good speaker of Korean is like pretty complicated. It's pretty hard because for one, you have to like retrain your mouth and your tongue. Like they have this letter called it's a ryu. It's between basically an L and an R. So you have to teach your tongue to like do that. Anyway, it's like you have to teach your mouth how to reform itself a little bit. But pounding, just keep working on it, and it just kind of, you develop the different muscles you need over time. But what I would say, like for studying Korean, it's like since it's probably one of the hardest languages. I mean, I memorized thousands and thousands of words, but I still couldn't, and like sentence forms and like grammar and all that kind of stuff. But like to be able to speak like a Korean, it's kind of hard because like you memorize the word, it's like, oh, this is lunchbox, but it's like, well, that's not the right lunchbox to use for that, right? And so there's like hundreds of words, and it's mixed between Chinese and then Korean. There was like this Korean emperor that he basically, like, Chinese is like, this is way too complicated. All memorizing like all these like Korean characters, this is like way too hard for the working class of people to learn. So he developed the Korean language. So it's built off of Chinese, but it's different. But because of that, you get all these kind of Chinese influences, and then Koreans have made up their own words. And so you kind of have like these multiple meanings and multiple uses for different words. So it makes it just like super confusing, and like, how do you know when to use different things? Anyway, so for studying Korean, since it is like this super complex language, you have to always be studying it. And so what I would do to study Korean every day was I would get a 3x5 card. I would put down like my 10 words I was going to try to learn that day, and I would write down a couple sentences. Now, memorizing sentences was probably one of the best things I did, because like you have those sentences that you can just turn to all the time. You know you're saying them perfect, and you can just like turn to them. If I could do it over, I'd probably just memorize like hundreds of sentences, like thousands of sentences. You know, like in this situation, this is when you say this, and then memorize that sentence. And then I would put like 1 or 2 grammar forms that I would be memorizing. And learning and trying to use. And so throughout the day, to like proselyte, instead of like going up to people and be like, hey, I'm a missionary, like, read the Book of Mormon. Have you heard about the Book of Mormon? Like, I did that too, like, better than that, obviously. But I would go up to a Korean, or sitting on the bus, I was like, hey, I'm studying Korean, and I'd be speaking all in Korean, you know. I'd be like, I'm studying Korean, and how do I use this word in the right context? You know, so I'd ask people that in Korea, and they were like, oh, well, and they would like give me an example and teach me. I'm like, oh, that's cool, thank you. Like, so is this right? And then they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, cool. I'm here a missionary at Korea serving. You know, that's why I'm trying to learn Korean, because I'm a missionary. Have you seen missionaries like us before? And then it was like, so I was studying all day, but then it was able to be kind of my break the ice to sharing the gospel. And so that was a very, very effective tool to like dual like punch, learning language, but also studying. And Koreans, it really means a lot to Koreans that when they can see you like studying super hard, because Koreans are probably some of the most diligent, just insane study, education people I know. Like, it's just like in their DNA. Like, kids in high school, they literally go to school from like 6 in the morning till like midnight, literally, because they take this big test and it kind of places them in society. So they study like crazy. So when they see you really trying to learn their language, it kind of makes them feel really, really good and kind of like you pretty quick. So anyway, so that's a tip. So always just like be memorizing sentences and those words, and use that as a way to break the ice when you're proselyting. Don't buy a trench coat. Yeah, they're like, yeah, you need a trench coat, it rains a lot. I'm like, okay. I spent like $500 on a freaking trench coat, and like threw that thing away. I was like and I was buying it with my own hard-earned money, you know, like I paid for my whole mission myself. But anyway, and like they make you like buy these shirts that are like super thick. It's like, dude, I don't know, I would save some money to buy clothes in the country you serve in, because they're going to be the right climate, the right type. I saw like the APs when I got there, they had these like light, breathable shirts, and I had these like cotton wool white shirts that were like so heavy, and I'm like sweating like a beast. But guess what? That's why I wore my whole mission until I actually bought a couple of short sleeve, like breathable shirts. But yeah, so don't buy everything they tell you to buy, just because you can buy stuff in the country, you know. So maybe buy some good wool socks, but because your feet don't get cold. But a coat, I'd probably wait to buy a coat until you get there, you know, because then it'll be the right climate, the right type of coat, and you won't look like a freak in a freaking trench coat, like in the middle of summer. So when you get on your mission, you think you're amazing. Like, you might think like you can do it all, you can do everything, and you're just like, I'm going to be the best missionary. I'm going to be awesome. I'm going to go convert people and like all this stuff. And then the Lord has his way of humbling you. And it takes longer or shorter for some people. It just depends. But if you're working hard and you truly love God, the Lord will humble you on your mission, and it's a huge blessing. It took me almost half my mission to finally realize that there's more to the missionary work than just working hard and thinking I'm awesome. Following the Spirit and seeking for that, the seeking for the Spirit in your mission is so important. When you think you can do it better, the Lord's work better than He can, you're not going to be successful. You're going to have a hard time. But when you are constantly seeking the Lord's will in your work and just saying, it wasn't until the point where I literally was like, God, I can't do this work without you. I can't be successful without you. Help me know what you'd have me do. What do you want me to do? And I know once I realized that I had to rely on God 100%. I was going to give my best effort, and I had been my whole mission, but it kind of was very humbling for me to realize you have to rely on God because this is His work. And then once I had that kind of paradigm shift of relying on God and seeking the Spirit, I saw so many miracles, just miracle after miracle after miracle. Of just we'd pray, receive inspiration, literally see where we needed to go. And then we'd go there, and I would be so stubborn, well, that's not the most efficient way to do things. Well, we're going to be over here earlier in the day, but we had just a thought that we should be up in this part of our mission part of the day. It's that's not efficient, that's not common sense, But then we go do the things that I was this is more efficient, we'll get more done if we do this. It wasn't until later in the day and we're okay, we haven't reached our goals yet. It's Sunday night. We were zone leaders, so we were accountable. If we can't hit our numbers, then our zone's not going to hit their numbers. And so finally I was humbled to be okay, let's listen to those thoughts that we had. And we went to that area, found our investigators, and the Lord is directing you. It's just, you just have to listen to those thoughts. You have to be humble enough to listen to the inspiration from the Spirit and totally rely on God and then do His work according to His will. And that's how to be a successful missionary. I'd like to share how to prepare to come home. A lot of missionaries, because on a mission you kind of try to put home in a totally different place. So you're just you'll think you don't want to think about it because you're trying to focus on your mission and all of that. And they keep doing that, and they fly home and they're oh, what do I do with my life? And a lot of times the bad thing that will happen is they'll get back into their home, they'll go back into their bedroom, and they revert to the old habits that they had before their mission. It was they never went on a mission. And that's very sad. Because basically, your mission, that little white handbook, it's this big rule book, and you're supposed to keep all those rules. Well, guess what? Those rules are life habits that will make you successful in life and a good person. They're important to keep, but it's going to give you all those habits to be a highly productive person in the world. And so when you get home from your mission, you don't want to just revert. You got to have a plan. And so what I did before I came home, my last transfer 2, I didn't start thinking about it until my last transfer 2, because once you start thinking about it, then you start thinking about home. You missed home, you've been away for 2 years or 18 months or whatever. But you need to plan out how you're going to live your life from your mission. Am I going to go to bed at 10:30 when I get home? There's going to be times when you want to stay out till midnight or whatever, and that's fine. But the majority of the time, are you going to bed early? Are you waking up early? Are you exercising? Are you reading your scriptures an hour a day in the morning? Or 30 minutes, whatever. But what are those things that you've learned from your mission that you're going to apply for the rest of your life? And so what I actually did is I went through Preach My Gospel, the White Handbook, and I translated all the rules, all those skills that you learn in there, and said, okay, how can this apply to my life going forward? Because it's not like you're going to go proselyting every day when you get home. But you can have rules like in the White Handbook, it says like you can't teach a lesson without another member, a man, being present with you to a woman. That's a great rule because even when you're married, it's like me and my wife have kind of made a rule that I'm never alone with another woman who that's not like my sister or something. Like either my wife needs to be there or another man needs to be there at least, or something like that. And so we kind of make these rules. So it's like you take all the mission rules and you recreate them for your life going forward. Because everything in that White Handbook and Preach My Gospel, it's awesome. Like weekly planning. Hey, if you weekly plan your whole life, you'll be super productive and be able to accomplish great things. Daily planning, if you're constantly doing kind of a daily plan, having A, B plans, like you'll be super productive your whole life. And so committing to keep doing those things before your mission and writing out a plan of how you're going to do that. Also, another huge thing is like you worked probably with a lot of, or you're going to work with a lot of ward mission leaders. So seeing how you work, your relationship working with those ward mission leaders, what kind of ward mission leader do I want to be when I'm called to that calling? And what kind of bishop do I want to be when I'm called to that calling? So you got to write all these things down. Like, what kind of spouse do I want to marry? Like in your mission, your views on life and eternity are so clear because the Spirit is just, you have that so abundantly with you because you're constantly testifying, you're constantly reading scriptures, you're just eating, breathing, and living the gospel. So you have the Spirit with you so abundantly. And so your views are very clear. And so as you're making that plan for your life, those last 2 transfers, literally I wrote down a topic like scripture study. Like, this is how I'm going to do scripture study for the rest of my life. I'm going to read my scriptures every day because one of the things that drove home to me most on my mission was like, I'd be teaching these people, pouring out my heart to them, testifying, trying to get them to come to church. I was like, they wouldn't come to church. I was like, well, if I can't get that person to church, I can't change them. The only person I can truly change is me. So guess what? Steve, you're going to go to the church for the rest of your dang life, and I don't care. You're just going to church, It's like, are you a progressing investigator? That's the other thing, that checklist of for progressing investigators. I'll go back and okay, am I a progressing investigator? It's like, am I progressing the gospel or am I slacking? Am I reading my scriptures, family scripture study, family prayer, family home evening, going to church, taking the sacrament, all those things make a progressing investigator. Guess what? If I'm not doing those after my mission, I'm not a progressing investigator. And so you got to commit to live all those commandments and then put up places maybe go through that little progressing investigator checklist every 6 months or something. How am I doing? Anyway, so you create this plan for your life, and I wrote down my dreams. I want to have a farm with a windmill and off the grid with pigs and horses and cows and chickens and an Ewok village, of course. But you can dream and stuff, and the Lord will help you reach those dreams. You're going to have to review this every 6 months. Every time we have general conference, after general conference, take what you learned from general conference, look at your life plan, and then make changes accordingly. But when you get home from your mission, you shouldn't be changing the way you live. You should keep doing those things, reading your scriptures. You should keep planning. You should keep doing all those things that are good and that have made your life so amazing. Exercising, all of that. So anyway, that's how to prepare to come home from a mission. Well, first of all, you're going to love Korea. Embrace the food, embrace the culture, and rely on God. Because the Lord, He's going to take you through, it's going to be a roller coaster of emotions where you're putting your heart and soul into teaching these people, and then maybe something doesn't work out according to what you wanted and you're working so hard. The Lord is going to raise you up to the highest you've ever been in your life, happiness and joy, and to probably the saddest you've ever been in your life. But both of those extremes is where you really learn to understand, there's opposition in all things. But mission was like the greatest thing and prepared me for life more than anything else I've ever done. It actually even says that in my patriarch blessing. It says, the mission will prepare you for life more than anything else you could do. And so you're blessed to go to Korea. It's a great nation, great people. They love us. Just embrace them, be respectful, and have fun. Have fun on your P days. If you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. So you're going to have a blast. Go just explore on your P days, learn the country, the culture, eat great food. You're going to love it. But remember to rely on the Lord, listen to the Spirit, like really listen to it and follow it. And I know that you'll have an awesome mission in Korea.